The most dangerous warrior is not the one who knows everything. It's the one willing to forget it all. Kyoto 1612. The wars had ended. Peace descended on Japan like snow on a battlefield, beautiful, cold, and unforgiving. Yamamoto Kenshin was 63 summers old, 147 jewels, 0 defeats, master of masters. His students could execute technique with machine precision. His reputation made grown men bow before speaking his name. But here's what no one tells you about perfection. It's a prison with invisible bars. Kenshin had spent 45 years building discipline so complete that every movement was automatic, every response predetermined, every moment controlled. And in that perfect control, he'd lost the one thing that makes a warrior truly alive: presence. This is not a story about gaining discipline. This is about what happens when discipline becomes the very thing destroying you. The question isn't how to build the cage, it's how to escape it. Chapter 1. The Perfect Master. Kyoto Spring Yamamoto Dojo. Dawn. The dojo was spotless, weapons arranged with geometric precision, students kneeling in perfect lines, not a sound except controlled breathing. Yamamoto Kenshin entered as he had every morning for 40 years. Same time, same steps, same ritual, everything exactly as tradition demanded. He was imposing still, 63 years old, but moving with the efficiency of steel. Grey streaked his top knot lines carved his face like characters on ancient stone. But his eyes held something the students couldn't see. Emptiness begin, Kenshin commanded. His students rose in unison. Perfect synchronization. They'd been trained to move as one, think as one, execute as one. No individuality, no improvisation, just flawless repetition of forms passed down through generations. Kenshin walked between the rows, observing every strike measured, every stance textbook, every breath controlled. It was perfect. It was dead. Tanaka! Kenshin called to his senior student, a man of 30 summers who'd trained under him for 15 years. Face me. Tanaka bowed and took position. They'd sparred 1,000 times. Kenshin knew every move his student would make before he made it, because he drilled those moves into him, erased every instinct, replaced spontaneity with prescribed response. They began. Tanaka attacked. Overhead strike exactly as taught. Kenshin parried exactly as prescribed. Counter, block, advance, retreat. Like a dance performed so many times, it had lost all meaning. Kenshin won. He always won. Not because he was faster or stronger, but because his students fought exactly as he'd programmed them to fight. And there, in that perfect victory, Kenshin felt the familiar hollowness expand. 45 years of discipline. And for what? To create warriors who move like puppets, to turn humans into machines. Class dismissed, Kenshin said abruptly. The students bowed and filed out in orderly silence. Perfect discipline, perfect obedience, perfect emptiness. Kenshin stood alone in the dojo, surrounded by weapons that had tasted blood in 147 jewels, surrounded by students who worshipped his discipline, surrounded by a legacy that would be remembered for centuries. And he felt nothing. That afternoon, Lord Matsudira, one of the Tokugawa shogunate senior officials, summoned Kenshin to the castle. "Yamamoto-sensei," the lord said with deep respect, "peace has come to Japan. The shogunate is secure. But we need men like you to train the next generation of warriors, men who understand discipline, who can pass on the old ways before they're forgotten." Kenshin bowed. "I am honored to serve. You've created the most disciplined students in Japan. They say your dojo produces warriors who never break, never hesitate, never fail. They are trained in the Shinkage Ryu tradition. They follow the forms perfectly." Lord Matsudara smiled. Perfect discipline. That's what Japan needs now. Not wild warriors, but controlled, obedient, precise soldiers. After the meeting, walking through Kyoto's streets, Kenshin felt something crack inside. Perfect discipline, perfect obedience, perfect death. He'd created exactly what society demanded. Warriors who followed orders without question, executed techniques without thought, maintained tradition without understanding why. He'd turned the warrior's path, which was supposed to be about life, presence, awakening into a system of control that killed the very spirit it was meant to cultivate. And the worst part, he'd done it to himself first. 45 years of waking at the same hour, training the same way, teaching the same forms, following the same philosophy, every spontaneous impulse suppressed, every moment of presence sacrificed for perfect execution. He'd built a cage so complete he couldn't even see the bars anymore. That evening, Kenshin did something he hadn't done in decades. He broke his routine. Instead of meditating at sunset in his private room, he walked to the edge of Kyoto, where the city met the forest, where chaos touched order, where wildness still existed. And for the first time in 45 years, Yamamoto Kenshin, master of masters, allowed himself to ask a forbidden question. What if everything I've mastered is exactly what's destroying me? Chapter 2. The Wandering Monk. 3 days later, Forest Path. Kenshin returned to the forest edge each evening, not training, not meditating in the formal way, just sitting, observing, letting his disciplined mind quiet enough to notice what he'd been missing. On the third evening, he found someone else there. An old monk, perhaps 70 summers, weathered face, simple robes, sitting on a rock by a small stream, watching water flow over stones. Kenshin approached with proper respect. Forg. I've the interruption, venerable monk. I did not realize this place was occupied. The monk looked up with eyes that held something Kenshin hadn't seen in decades. Joy. Simple, uncomplicated joy. The forest doesn't belong to me. Sit if you wish. Kenshin sat maintaining perfect posture out of habit, back straight, hands properly positioned, breathing controlled. They sat in silence for several minutes before the monk spoke. You're Yamamoto Kenshin, the master of Shinkage-ryu, 147 victories. You know of me, everyone knows of you, the perfect warrior, the master who never loses, never breaks, never hers. The monk paused. Tell me, Kenshin, are you happy? The question struck like a blade finding an undefended opening. Happiness is not the purpose of the warrior's path, isn't it? The monk smiled gently. Then what is the purpose? Discipline, mastery, service, honor. And you have all these things? Yes. And yet you come here each evening, sitting at the edge of the forest, looking like a man who's lost something he can't name. Kenshin felt his perfect composure crack. Just slightly, but enough. I have everything I trained for, everything tradition demands. But he'd never admitted this to anyone, never even admitted it to himself clearly. I feel nothing. My students execute techniques perfectly. My discipline never waver, my legacy is secure, and I feel empty. The monk nodded, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. Do you know what Shosin means? Kenshin, beginner's mind. Of course, it's a basic Zen concept. Then tell me, when was the last time you experienced it? Kenshin opened his mouth to answer, then stopped. When had he last approached anything with fresh eyes? When had he last felt wonder, curiosity, the openness of not knowing? 45 years ago, he whispered, when I was a student. And now I know everything. Every technique, every form, every response to every sigh. Situation. There are no surprises, no discovery, just execution. Shosin the monk said is not just for beginners. It is the essence of presence itself. The moment you believe you know everything, you stop being present with what is. You're only present with your accumulated knowledge, your past experiences, your rigid expectations. He picked up a stone and tossed it into the stream. It disrupted the perfect flow, creating ripples that changed the entire surface. Your discipline has become like still water, perfectly controlled, beautifully clear, but still water eventually stagnates. Life requires flow, adaptation, the willingness to be disrupted. The monk stood, preparing to leave. Wait, Kenshin said. Who are you? Just a wandering monk. But if you truly want to understand what I'm saying, meet me here tomorrow. Bring your sword. Let me show you something that will either free you or destroy you. As the monk walked away, Kenshin sat with a feeling he hadn't experienced in decades. Uncertainty, and beneath it, the first faint pulse of something that might be called life. The monk's words echoed in his mind, but they carried a quality that transcended the moment, as if speaking not just to Kenshin, but to anyone who might hear this story. Throughout all of history, warriors have reached this same point where mastery becomes prison, where discipline becomes death, where perfect control creates perfect emptiness. If you recognize this, if you feel Kenshin's hollowness in your own life, your own perfect routines, your own rigid disciplines, know that you're not alone. This path he's about to walk, this journey of unlearning, this is available to you too. At Presence and Purpose, we explore this paradox every week. Not the easy teachings about building discipline, but the harder wisdom about when discipline itself becomes the obstacle. When the cage you've built so carefully becomes the very thing you must escape. Walk with us, not to add more control, but to discover the freedom that emerges when perfect discipline finally cracks open. Kenshin sat long into the night, feeling the first tremors of transformation. The perfect master was about to become a confused student, and somehow that confusion felt more alive than all his certainty combined. Chapter 3. The Unlearning. Next evening, forest meeting. Kenshin arrived early as discipline demanded. The monk was already there as if he'd never left. "You came," the monk said. "You asked me to." "No," I offered. "You chose." That distinction matters. The monk gestured to an open clearing. "Draw your sword." Kenshin unsheathed his blade, a perfect weapon maintained with perfect care, wielded with perfect technique for 45 years. "Now," the monk said, "attack me." "I cannot strike an unarmed monk." "I didn't say strike me. I said attack me. Show me your perfect technique, your flawless form, everything you've mastered." Kenshin moved into stance, classical Shinkage Ryu opening position. He'd performed this 10,000 times. His body knew every micro-adjustment. He executed a basic overhead strike. Textbook perfect, precise, controlled. The monk didn't move, didn't flinch, just watched again, he said, faster this time. Kenshin attacked, multiple strikes, each one perfect, each one exactly as the ancient masters had prescribed. The monk remained completely still. "Do you know what I see?" the monk asked. "I see a man performing a kata, beautiful, precise, and completely disconnected from the present moment. These are the classical forms. These are movements you memorized decades ago. You're not here now responding to me. This environment, this exact moment, you're executing pre-programmed responses. Your body is here. But you, your awareness, your presence, you're living in the past in memory and accumulated pattern." Kenshin felt anger rise. 45 years of mastery being dismissed as mere memory. "Then what would you have me do?" The words came out sharper than intended. "Put down your sword." "What?" "Put it down. Lay it on the ground." Kenshin hesitated. The sword was an extension of himself. Putting it down felt like cutting off his own arm, but he did it. Now the monk said, "I'm going to attack you and you're going to forget everything you know." "That's impossible. Muscle memory training. I know that's why this is necessary. The only way to find presence is to first lose all the defenses you've built against it." The monk moved. Not fast, not slow, just moved. Kenshin's body responded automatically. Perfect block, perfect counter, perfect form. "Stop," the monk commanded. "Do you see what you did? I moved and you executed technique. You didn't actually perceive me. You perceived a category overhead attack and retrieved the programmed response. You're not fighting me. You're fighting your memory of similar attacks from decades ago. How else would I respond? By being here, by actually seeing me, this moment, this specific movement, by responding to what is, not what your training tells you should be." The monk moved again. This time, when Kenshin's body started to execute the classical response, the monk was already somewhere else. The perfect technique struck empty air. You see, your perfection is predictable, and anything predictable can be exploited. True mastery isn't perfect execution of known forms, it's perfect adaptation to unknown circumstances. They continued for an hour. Every time Kenshin relied on his training, the monk exposed the gap. Every time Kenshin executed perfect technique, it failed because the situation didn't match the template. Finally, exhausted and humiliated, Kenshin stopped. "I don't understand. You're telling me that 45 years of training are worthless?" "No, I am telling you that 45 years of training have become a cage. Your technique is magnificent. But you've confused technique with truth, form with essence, memory with presence." "Then teach me," Kenshin said, and heard the desperation in his own voice. "I can't teach you what you need to learn. I can only remove what's blocking you from discovering it yourself." The monk sat on a nearby rock, For the next 7 days, I'm going to give you challenges. Each one will require you to abandon something you believe makes you a master. Each one will feel like dying, and each one will be necessary for you to become truly alive. The first challenge is this. For the next 3 days, you are forbidden from teaching your students, forbidden from practicing any technique you know, forbidden from doing anything you've done before. You must approach every moment as if you've never experienced it. That's impossible. I run a dojo. I have responsibilities. Then delegate them or cancel classes. This is more important. Why would I? Because right now, Yamamoto Kenshin, you're not a warrior. You're a very sophisticated ghost, haunting the memory of who you used to be. And ghosts, no matter how perfect their form, are already dead. The word struck deeper than any blade. That night, Kenshin sent word to his senior students. Classes suspended for 1 week. Personal training. The perfect master was about to attempt the most difficult challenge of his life, forgetting everything he knew. Chapter 4. The Warrior Who Couldn't Remember. Days 4 through 6. The 3-day experiment. Kenshin tried to follow the monk's instruction, tried to approach each moment fresh, but 45 years of pattern ran too deep. He woke at dawn, same time he'd woken for 40 years. Walked to the dojo, same steps. Reached for his sword, same motion. Every impulse was predetermined, every choice made by accumulated habit. By midday of the first day, He was in crisis. Without his routines, without his techniques, without his knowledge, who was he? The second day was worse. He tried to sit in meditation, but his body automatically assumed the perfect posture he'd maintained for decades. He tried to eat mindfully, but his hand moved to the chopsticks with the exact efficiency he'd trained. Everything he did was memory. Nowhere could he find the fresh moment the monk described. On the third evening, frustrated and exhausted, he returned to the forest clearing. "I can't do it," he admitted. "Every moment I try to be present, my training takes over. I've automated myself so completely that I can't find the spontaneous response anymore." "Good," the monk said. "Good. You've discovered the problem. That's the first step." He gestured for Kenshin to sit. "Let me tell you about Mushin, the state of no mind. I know Mushin. It's a fundamental concept and you know about Mushin. That's different from knowing Mushin itself. Tell me what your textbooks say." Mushin is the state where the mind is empty of thought, where action flows spontaneously without conscious intention. Perfect textbook answer. Now tell me, have you ever experienced it? Kenshin thought back, searched through 45 years of training and realized, no, never. Every action he took was deliberate, controlled, executed with full conscious awareness of technique. "I know I haven't. Because you've spent 45 years building the opposite. You've created a mind so full of technique, strategy, form, and protocol that there's no space for Mushin to arise. You filled the cup so completely with accumulated knowledge that nothing new can enter. Then how do I empty it? You don't empty it. That's the trap. Trying to empty the mind is just another form of control. You stop adding to it. You stop defending it. You let it settle naturally." The monk picked up Kenshin's sword without asking a mission, breaking every protocol. "Watch this," he said. He swung the sword, not in any recognizable form, not following any school's technique, just swung it, following the natural weight of the blade, the momentum of the movement, the shape of the space. It was messy, unpredictable, completely unprofessional, and it was the most alive thing Kenshin had seen in decades. "You see," the monk said, handing the sword back. "I don't know Shinkage Ryu. I don't know any formal technique. So when I swing the sword, I'm just swinging the sword. No memory, no comparison, no judgment of whether it's correct. Just this moment, this weight, this movement. But that's sloppy, inefficient against every principle you've memorized. But is it false? Is it untrue? Or is it just different from what you believe should be true?" Kenshin stared at the sword in his hands. Had he ever, even once in 45 years, just swung it without reference to form, without comparison to ideal, without judgment of correctness? No, never. Every movement measured against the template, every action evaluated against the standard. He turned himself into a quality control mechanism for adherence to tradition, and in the process stopped being a human being, responding to life itself. The fourth challenge, the monk said, is this. Tomorrow spend the entire day doing everything wrong. Deliberately break every rule you've built. Eat at the wrong time. Walk the wrong route. Hold your sword the wrong way. Speak the wrong words. Let yourself be completely improper. That's Kenshin felt his entire identity rebelling. That's against everything I've exactly, which is why it's necessary. You need to discover that the world doesn't end when you're imperfect, that life continues when form is broken, that you, the essential you beneath all the training, survives when every external structure is removed, that Kenshin lay awake, terrified. The monk was asking him to dismantle the architecture of his entire existence. Every structure he'd built, every identity he'd claimed, every defense against chaos. It felt like being asked to die. And maybe he realized that's exactly what it was. Chapter 5. The Death of the Perfect Warrior. Day 7. The Breaking Point. Kenshin woke late, let himself sleep past dawn for the first time in 45 years. The guilt was almost physical. He dressed carelessly, didn't bow to his family altar, walked to the forest without his sword, breaking the absolute samurai protocol of never being unarmed. Every wrong action felt like tearing off his own skin. At the clearing, the monk was waiting. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Like I'm dissolving, like everything that makes me who I am is falling apart." "Good. Because everything you think makes you who you are is actually just accumulated habit masquerading as identity. The real you, the one who observes the habits, who experiences life directly, that one is just beginning to emerge. I don't understand. You will. Today's challenge is the hardest yet. I'm going to attack you, really attack you, and you must respond with absolutely no technique, no training, no memory, just spontaneous response to what is actually happening." Kenshin felt fear, pure, unfiltered fear he hadn't felt since he was a young student. "I'll be killed without technique, without form." You might be, or you might discover that technique was never what kept you alive. Maybe something deeper did, something present before all your training, something that emerges when all the overlay is stripped away. The monk attacked fast, real, dangerous. Kenshin's body responded automatically with perfect shinkage. Ryu defense. The monk stopped again. Without that, let it go. They tried again and again. Each time, Kenshin's training took over. 45 years of muscle memory couldn't just be shut off. Then the monk changed tactics. He created an attack pattern Kenshin had never seen, something no classical form addressed, something completely novel. And in that moment of genuine not knowing, something shifted. Kenshin moved. Not from technique, not from memory, just moved. His body responded to the actual threat, the actual space, the actual moment. It was messy, inefficient, completely unlike his perfect form. And it worked. For one heartbeat, just one, he'd been present, truly completely present, not executing memory, but responding to reality. Then his mind caught up, tried to analyze what happened, and the moment was gone. But that single heartbeat changed everything. "Did you feel it?" the monk asked. "Yes, for just a moment I was here, not remembering being here, but actually here." That's Zanshin, remaining awareness. Not the awareness of technique, but awareness itself. Raw, direct. Before thought divides it into categories, Kenshin sat heavily on the ground, trembling. "I've spent my entire life building perfect discipline, perfect control, perfect technique, and it was all just a defense, a way to avoid ever having to be truly present with the unknown, the uncertainty, the uncontrollable reality of each moment." Yes, then what was it all for? 45 years, 147 duels, thousands of hours of training. Was it all wasted? No, the monk said gently. It brought you here to this moment where you're finally ready to let it all go and discover what's underneath. Without those 45 years, you wouldn't have the foundation strong enough to withstand its own dissolution. He stood and offered Kenshin his hand. "The final challenge," he said, "is this. Return to your dojo, face your students, and teach them not what you know, but what you've just discovered. Teach them that mastery isn't the end. It's the place where true learning can finally begin." A feeling arose in Kenshin's meditation, not his thought, but something that seemed to speak through time itself to anyone who might hear. You who are listening to this story, you who feel the weight of your own perfect routines, your own rigid disciplines, your own carefully built cages, This teaching is for you too. At Presence and Purpose, we don't just teach discipline. We teach when discipline itself becomes the obstacle, when the structures you've built to protect yourself become the prison you need to escape. If you recognize this struggle, if Kenshin's journey mirrors your own need to unlearn, to become a beginner again, to rediscover presence beneath all your accumulated patterns, then walk this path with us. Every week, we explore these paradoxes, not the easy answers, but the difficult questions that lead to transformation. Join us not to add more control, but to discover what emerges when control finally surrenders. The insight passed, but its truth remained, settling into Kenshin like snow on stone. Chapter 6, The Dojo of Unlearning. Days 8 through 14, The Transformation. Kenshin returned to his dojo. His students knelt in perfect rows, relieved their master had returned after the unexplained 7-day absence. Sensei, Tanaka said with proper respect, "Shall we resume regular training?" Kenshin looked at them, saw himself in their rigid posture, their perfect discipline, their dead eyes. "No," he said. "Today we do something different." Confusion rippled through the students. "Put away your swords," Kenshin commanded. More confusion, but they obeyed. "For the next 7 days, I'm going to teach you something no master has ever taught you. I'm going to teach you how to forget everything you know." Over the next week, Kenshin did what the monk had done for him. He created situations where technique failed, where perfect form was useless, where only presence and adaptation could work. He taught them to move without predetermined patterns, to respond to actual circumstances rather than memorized situations, to trust the moment rather than their training. Some students were horrified. This violated everything they understood about the martial way. Others, the ones whose spirit hadn't been completely crushed by rigid discipline, felt something awaken. On the 7th day, a group of visiting masters came to observe the famous Yamamoto dojo. They expected to see perfect synchronization, perfect execution of classical forms. Instead, they saw chaos, students moving unpredictably, techniques being invented spontaneously, forms being broken and reassembled moment by moment. "Yamamoto-san," one master said with barely disguised contempt, "what has happened to your discipline?" Kenshin bowed respectfully. "I discovered it was killing my students. Now I'm teaching them to be alive. This is not the way of the samurai. Perhaps not the way it's been, but perhaps the way it needs to become." The visiting masters left, scandalized. Word spread through Kyoto. Yamamoto Kenshin had gone mad. The perfect master had abandoned tradition. His enrollment dropped. Lords stopped sending their sons. Other masters publicly criticized his methods. But something else happened. The students who stayed, the ones willing to unlearn, transformed. They moved differently, fought differently, carried themselves with a presence that made observers uncomfortable, because it was so alive, so unpredictable, so real. They weren't better at executing forms. They were better at being present with what is. One afternoon, a young samurai from a rival school challenged Kenshin. The young man was talented, aggressive, full of the rigid confidence that comes from years of discipline. They faced each other. The young samurai attacked with perfect technique, classical overhei, ad strike exactly as the books prescribed. Kenshin didn't counter with classical response. He just moved, not from technique, but from presence. His body responded to the actual attack, not the category overhead strike, but this specific movement, in this specific moment, by this specific person. His response was unorthodox, unpredictable, completely outside any school's curriculum, and devastatingly effective. The young samurai found himself disarmed without understanding how. "What school was that?" the young man asked, confused. "No school," Kenshin said, "just this moment." Chapter 7, The Master Who Became a Student. 3 years later, Kenshin was 66 now. His dojo had shrunk from 80 students to 20, but those 20 were different from any warriors in Japan. They could still execute perfect technique when needed, but they weren't slaves to it. They could follow form perfectly, but they could also abandon it completely when circumstances demanded. They'd learned what Kenshin had learned. True mastery isn't perfect execution, it's perfect adaptation. One day, a former student, one who'd left when Kenshin went mad, returned. "Sensei," the man said, "I've trained at 3 other dojos since leaving here. All of them taught me perfect technique. All of them made me a better fighter. But he struggled for words. I feel dead inside just like I did here 3 years ago. And I remembered that before you changed, you looked the same way, dead inside despite being perfect outside. And now, Kenshin asked, now you look alive even though your technique is. The student searched for words less perfect. You look alive. Do you want to learn that? Yes, but I'm afraid because learning it seems to require unlearning everything I've built, and I've built so much. I know that's the terror of it. Kenshin gestured for the student to sit. Let me tell you what I've learned in 3 years of unlearning. Everything I spent 45 years mastering. The warrior path has been taught wrong for centuries. We've been teaching young men to build perfect discipline, perfect control, perfect technique. We've told them this is mastery, but it's not. It's just stage 1. Stage 1 is necessary. You need foundation. You need technique. You need discipline. Without it, you're just chaos. But, and this is what no one tells you, stage 1 is just the preparation for stage 2. Stage 2 is learning that everything you built in stage 1 can become your prison. That perfect discipline can make you rigid. That complete control can make you unable to adapt. That flawless technique can make you predictable and therefore defeatable. Stage 3, true mastery, is learning when to use what you built and when to abandon it completely. It's holding discipline lightly enough to let it go when presence demands it. It's being so secure in your technique that you can forget it entirely when the moment requires something unprecedented. The former student listened, and in his listening something opened. Most warriors never reach stage 3, Kenshin continued, because they can't bear the death of stage 1. They can't survive the dissolution of everything they've built. They'd rather live as perfect but dead masters than risk the chaos of becoming students again. But here's the secret. The death is not real. What dies is only the identity you built around the discipline. The discipline itself, when you need it, remains. You just stop being enslaved to it. They sat in silence for several minutes before Kenshin spoke again, this time with a voice that seemed to transcend the immediate moment. This teaching, this paradox of mastery, continues beyond this dojo, beyond this era, beyond feudal Japan itself. Wherever humans build perfect systems and then discover those systems have become prisons, this truth waits, at presence and purpose. We preserve this understanding. Not the easy path of building discipline, but the harder wisdom of knowing when discipline itself must be transcended. For those who hear this story and recognize themselves, who feel the deadness of their own perfection, the rigidity of their own control, this community awaits. We explore these paradoxes weekly, not the comfortable teachings, but the transformative ones that require everything you've built to be questioned. Join us. Subscribe to this path. Because sometimes the ultimate discipline is learning when to break all your rules. Sometimes the greatest mastery is becoming a student again. Walk with us. Not to gain more control, but to discover the freedom that emerges when perfect discipline finally learns to dance. The former student bowed deeply. Sensei, I want to train here again, but differently this time. Good, Kenshin said. Then let's begin by forgetting everything you know. The way forward, 8 years after the awakening. Kenshin was 69 years old now. He'd lived longer than most samurai who'd fought in the wars, and he discovered something. The real war wasn't on battlefields. It was in the mind. His small dojo had become known not for producing the most disciplined warriors, but for creating the most adaptable ones. Students came from across Japan, drawn by rumors of the master who taught teaching the practice of unlearning. One autumn evening, Kenshin sat with the wandering monk who'd started all this 8 years ago. Did you know, Kenshin asked, when you approached me that first time that I would transform? No, I only knew you were ready to be asked the question. Whether you'd answer it, that was never certain. What question? The one every master must face. Are you more committed to your identity as a master or to discovering truth? Most choose identity. It's safer, more comfortable, more socially reward. And I chose truth. You chose to at least be willing to let identity dissolve. That willingness, that's what opened everything. Kenshin smiled. I tell my students now, perfect discipline is just the beginning. Real mastery is learning when discipline itself is the obstacle. And what do they say? Some think I'm insane, some are terrified, and some, He gestured to students training nearby, moving with unpredictable grace. Some understand those are the ones who become truly dangerous because they have both discipline and freedom, both structure and adaptability, both form and formlessness. They are the ones who can play within the rules and break them simultaneously, who can follow tradition perfectly while transcending it completely. The monk stood to leave. "My work here is done. You've learned what you needed. Will I see you again? Perhaps if you forget all this and need to be reminded." The monk's eyes twinkled. The danger of mastering unlearning is thinking you've mastered it. The moment you believe you've arrived, you've become rigid again. The path is practicing beginner's mind forever. After the monk left, Kenshin sat alone as stars emerged in the darkening sky. He thought about his journey from perfect master to confused student to something that couldn't be named. He'd learned that true strength isn't rigidity, true discipline isn't control, true mastery isn't perfection. True strength is flexibility, true discipline is presence, true mastery is endless willingness to be a beginner. A young student approached one who'd arrived just that week. "Sensei, I'm afraid I don't understand your teaching. It seems to contradict itself. You say build discipline, then abandon it. Follow form, then break it. Master technique, then forget it. How can all these contradictions be true?" Kenshin smiled. "They can't be. That's the point. Truth lives in the space between the contradictions, not in choosing one side over the other." "I still don't understand." "Good. That's the perfect place to begin. Come back tomorrow. We'll start your training by teaching you everything wrong." The student bowed and left, more confused than ever. Kenshin sat alone in his dojo, surrounded by weapons that had tasted blood in 147 duels, surrounded by a legacy of unlearning that would confuse scholars for centuries. Surrounded by the paradox of his entire life, he'd become a master by forgetting how to be one. He'd found presence by abandoning perfect control. He discovered life by allowing his perfect discipline to die. And somewhere in that death, in that dissolution, in that terrifying loss of everything he'd built, he'd found something no technique could teach, no tradition could preserve, no discipline could capture. The raw, alive, present moment itself. Before thought, before category, before the mind's insistence on making everything fit into known patterns. Just this, just here, just now. The old master closed his eyes and breathed. No special technique, no perfect posture, just breathing. And in that simple act, he was more powerfully present than in 45 years of perfect discipline had ever made him. This is the way beyond mastery, the path that begins where achievement ends, the warrior who is truly dangerous because they have nothing left to defend. Walk it carefully or don't walk it carefully, both are fine. Because the ultimate teaching is this: there is no ultimate teaching, only endless presence with what